The first thing you need to understand is that room 13 was not cheap because the building was old, or because the neighborhood was bad, or because the laundromat under it had been closed for years. It was cheap because somebody always needed to be living above the last dryer, and by the time I understood why, my name was already on the lease. My name is Ethan Miller, and back then I was 31 years old, living out of a dented Ford Escape in Cleveland, Ohio, pretending my life was still one good week away from turning around. I had been doing delivery work for almost 4 years, mostly food, groceries, pharmacy runs, anything an app would send me to pick up and drop off. It was not glamorous, but it kept gas in the tank and rent paid, at least until the orders slowed down and my landlord decided my one-bedroom apartment was suddenly worth $400 more a month. I tried arguing. I tried applying for better jobs. I tried sleeping less and working longer routes, but none of it added up. By the end of October, I had 2 duffel bags in the back seat, a phone charger running through the cigarette lighter, and a gym membership I only kept because it meant I could shower somewhere warm. That was when I saw the listing in a local housing group. Room 13 above empty laundromat. $450 a month. Cash only. Available tonight. No deposit if tenant can move in before midnight. I remember laughing when I read it. Not because it was funny, but because it sounded exactly like the kind of scam desperate people click on right before things get worse. Still, I messaged the number. I told myself I was only checking. I told myself if it looked wrong, I would leave. But when you have spent 3 nights sleeping in a parking lot behind a 24-hour grocery store, your definition of wrong gets flexible. The woman who answered called herself Mrs. Helen Ward. Her messages were short, polite, and old-fashioned, the kind of text that used full punctuation and no emojis. She said the room was small but clean. She said utilities were included. She said the building was quiet because the laundromat downstairs had not been open to customers in nearly a decade. Then she sent the address, and one final message came through before I started the car. Use the back entrance only. Do not try the front doors after dark. I should have stopped there. I should have asked why a tenant could not use the front doors of his own building. Instead, I looked at the rain tapping against my windshield, at the fogged-up windows, at the grocery store security guard already watching my car like he was deciding whether to knock, and I drove. The place sat on the edge of an older neighborhood, between a shuttered pawn shop and a narrow brick building with blacked-out windows. The laundromat sign still hung above the front, sun-faded and cracked, with only 3 letters flickering in dull blue neon. The glass doors were locked from inside with a chain, but through them I could see rows of washing machines and dryers sitting in the dark like metal mouths. The last dryer was at the very back, larger than the others, its round door reflecting the streetlight in a way that looked almost wet. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Then someone behind me said, "Mr. Miller," and my heart jumped so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Mrs. Ward stood at the mouth of the alley beside the building, holding a black umbrella and a ring of old brass keys. She was in her late 60s, maybe older, with light skin, a narrow face, gray hair pinned into a low bun, and a faded gray cardigan buttoned all the way to her throat. She did not smile, but she did not look unfriendly either. She looked tired in a permanent way, like she had been waiting for me long before I answered the listing. She led me through the alley to a metal staircase bolted to the back of the building. The steps were slick with rain, and every one of them gave a hollow clang under my shoes. Room 13 was at the top, behind a brown door with fresh paint around the numbers and deep scratches underneath them, scratches too straight to be accidental. The room itself was not much, just a bed, a desk, a small bathroom, a microwave, and one window facing the alley, but it was warm. It had a lock. It was not the front seat of my car. I paid Mrs. Ward the first month in cash before she even asked. She counted it once, folded it into her purse, and handed me a key, a flashlight, and a folded sheet of paper. "House rules," she said. I almost smiled, thinking she meant trash pickup or quiet hours. Then she looked past me at the floor, as if she could see through it into the laundromat below. "Do not use the back stairs between 1:45 and 4:04 in the morning. Keep the hall light on after 2. And Mr. Miller, if you hear the last dryer start running, do not go downstairs to check it." I waited for her to explain. She did not. She only stepped back into the rain and said the one thing that made my mouth go dry before I even knew what it meant. "The last dryer is not part of your lease." For a minute after Mrs. Ward left, I just stood in the middle of room 13 with the key in one hand and that folded sheet of rules in the other, listening to her footsteps disappear down the metal stairs. The rain kept tapping against the window. Somewhere below me, the old building settled with a low groan, the kind of sound old pipes and old would make when the temperature drops. I told myself that was all it was. Pipes, boards, a place that had been standing too long and had learned how to complain. I locked the door, slid the chain into place, and looked around at what was now technically my home. The room was smaller than the photos had made it seem, but I had expected that. The bed was pushed against the left wall with a thin blue blanket folded at the end. There was a cheap wooden desk under the window, a microwave on top of a mini fridge, one narrow closet, and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. The air smelled faintly of old detergent, not unpleasant at first, just clean in a stale way, like towels that had been stored too long. I set my duffel bags on the floor and tried to feel grateful. $450 a month. Heat included. A lock on the door. A mattress that was not a driver's seat. I should have been relieved. Instead, I kept looking at the floor. The laundromat was directly beneath me. I could picture it from the few seconds I had looked through the front glass. Rows of machines sitting in the dark, the last dryer at the back with its round door catching the streetlight. I did not like that I could picture it so clearly. I unfolded the rules, but only skimmed the top line before tossing the paper onto the desk. I was tired, cold, and too embarrassed by my own situation to let myself be scared by a weird old landlord with a flair for dramatic warnings. Some buildings had strange policies. Maybe teenagers had been sneaking into the laundromat at night. Maybe the last tenant had messed with the machines or tried to steal copper wiring. Maybe Mrs. Ward had learned that if she made a place sound creepy enough, people stopped asking for repairs. That explanation made sense, so I held on to it. I changed into dry clothes, plugged in my phone, and carried one duffel into the bathroom to unpack my toothbrush. The bathroom light buzzed when I flicked it on, then steadied into a weak yellow glow. The sink had rust stains around the drain, and the mirror cabinet did not close all the way. When I opened it, there was nothing inside except a travel-size bar of soap and a strip of masking tape stuck to the back panel. Someone had written on the tape in faded black marker, "Keep the fan on if the room smells sweet." I stared at it longer than I wanted to. Then I peeled it off and threw it in the trash, immediately feeling childish for doing it. I did not want warnings taped inside my bathroom. I did not want rules on my desk. I wanted an ordinary room with ordinary problems, like bad water pressure and thin walls. I turned the fan on anyway. I told myself it was because the bathroom smelled damp. Around midnight, I finally sat on the bed with a gas station sandwich and checked my delivery apps, hoping maybe tomorrow would be better. The rain had slowed, and the street outside had gone almost silent except for the occasional hiss of tires on wet pavement. The laundromat below stayed dark. No footsteps, no voices, no machines. The quiet helped. I started to believe I had made the right decision. Then a soft, metallic clink came from under the floor. I froze with half the sandwich in my hand. It sounded exactly like a coin dropping into a metal tray. I waited. Nothing followed. My heart was already beating faster, which annoyed me. It was an old building. A radiator ping. A loose pipe. Something expanding or cooling. I took another bite and forced myself to chew. A few seconds later, the clink came again. This time it rolled, faintly, as if a quarter had spun across tile before falling flat. I looked at the folded rule sheet on the desk. The top of it lifted slightly in the breeze from the heater vent, then settled again. I almost laughed. I actually whispered, "No, not doing this," like saying it out loud would keep the night normal. I stood up and walked to the window instead of the door. From there, I could see the alley, the metal stairs, and the faint blue flicker of the laundromat sign reflected on the wet brick wall across from me. Nothing moved outside. No one was sneaking around. No teenagers, no vandals, no Mrs. Ward lurking under an umbrella. The building was quiet again. That should have calmed me down. Instead, the silence felt arranged. At 1:12 a.m., I lay down with my shoes still on, telling myself I would only rest for a few minutes. I must have drifted, because the next thing I knew, I was awake in complete darkness, my eyes open before my brain understood why. The hall light outside my door was still on, its thin glow showing under the frame. The bathroom fan hummed. My phone on the desk read 1:43 a.m., 2 minutes before Mrs. Ward's first warning. I sat up slowly. Under the floor, something clicked. Then another click. Then a low mechanical hum rolled through the room, deep enough to vibrate through the bed frame and into my ribs. It was not plumbing. It was not the building settling. It was the sound of a large machine turning on below me. I held my breath and looked toward the desk, where the folded sheet of house rules waited in the hall light like it had been expecting me to wake up. I reached for the rule sheet without getting out of bed at first, stretching one arm toward the desk like I was afraid the floor might. Notice if I moved too quickly. The hum beneath me continued, slow and steady, a deep circular rhythm that pressed up through the mattress and into my bones. It sounded exactly like a dryer running one floor below, except there was no reason for any dryer to be running in a laundromat that had been closed for 10 years. My phone said 1:44 a.m. I told myself it was a timer, some old maintenance cycle. Maybe Mrs. Ward kept one machine powered to prevent moisture or mold. It was weak, but it was something, and I needed something normal to stand on. I grabbed the paper, unfolded it, and finally read more than the first line. The handwriting was neat but uneven, like whoever wrote it had tried very hard to stay calm. Rule 1. Do not go downstairs between 1:45 a.m. and 4:04 a.m. for any reason. If there is a fire, smoke will rise. If there is a flood, water will reach your door. If there is a person downstairs, they are not supposed to be there. I looked at the clock again. 1:45 a.m. exactly. The hum below grew louder for one full second, as if the building had inhaled. My mouth went dry. Rule 2. Keep the hallway light on after 2 a.m. If it burns out, do not replace the bulb until morning. Sit with your back to the bathroom door and keep your eyes on the window. I glanced toward the thin glow under my door. The hall light was still on. It seemed ridiculous that a light bulb could matter, but I suddenly felt grateful for that line of yellow under the frame. Rule 3. If the last dryer starts after 2 a.m., do not count the rotations. Do not tap your fingers to the rhythm. Do not match your breathing to it. Attention is payment. That one made my skin prickle. I was already listening too closely. Worse than that, I realized my fingers had been moving against the blanket, softly keeping time with the turning below. I yanked my hand back like the fabric had burned me. The dryer had not started after 2 o'clock yet, I told myself. It started before. Maybe that meant the rule did not apply. Maybe these rules were written by some paranoid tenant who heard a basement boiler and turned it into a bedtime story. I almost believed that until the hum stopped. The sudden silence was so complete that my ears rang. Then, from directly beneath my room, came a single clear clink. A coin dropping. Rule 4. If you hear a coin fall in the laundromat after closing, do not pick it up. If one appears in your room, do not touch it with bare skin. Place it in a glass of water and leave the glass outside your door before sunrise. I stared at the floorboards. Another clink. Then another. Each one spaced a few seconds apart, patient and deliberate. It sounded like someone was feeding quarters into a machine. Rule 5. If you see light inside the drum of the last dryer, close your curtains and turn off any reflective screens. It can use glass better than it uses sound. My eyes moved to the black rectangle of my phone. In the dark screen, I could see the faint shape of my own face and the room behind me. I flipped it face down immediately. The television mounted high in the corner was unplugged, but its screen was black enough to reflect the window, the bed, the bathroom door. I threw my jacket over it. I felt stupid doing it. I felt even more stupid because I was relieved after I did. Rule 6. If a voice calls from downstairs, do not answer, even if it knows your name, especially if it sounds cold, tired, or familiar. Rule 7. If the dryer stops at 2:13 a.m., go to the bathroom, stand inside the tub, and do not step out until you hear 3 knocks from the pipes. Do not open the bathroom cabinet during this time. I thought of the strip of masking tape I had peeled out of that cabinet and thrown away. Keep the fan on if the room smells sweet. My stomach tightened. Rule 8. If the air begins to smell like sweet detergent, call Mrs. Ward, but do not speak into the phone. Tap 3 times on the nearest pipe and wait. The hum started again. I froze. My phone was still face down, but I did not need to look at it to know the time had changed. The machine below settled into a smoother rhythm, heavier than before, a slow turning that made the bed frame tick against the wall. I tried not to count. I tried not to breathe with it. But the human brain is a stupid thing when it is scared. It looks for patterns. It makes numbers out of noise. 1 rotation. 2. 3. I squeezed my eyes shut. Do not count. Do not count. Do not count. By the time I opened them, my pulse was pounding in my throat, and the room felt colder. I needed Mrs. Ward. I needed someone real to tell me this was some old building prank, some local superstition that sounded worse at night. I picked up my phone with my eyes half averted from the screen and called her number. No service. That made no sense. I had full bars earlier. I moved toward the window, holding the phone up, careful not to look at the reflection in the glass. Still nothing. Then the laundromat below me gave a long metallic groan, and from somewhere under the floor, a woman whispered my name. Ethan. I stopped breathing. The voice was not loud. It was not even dramatic. It was soft, close, and tired, like someone sitting at the bottom of the stairs with her head resting against the wall. Ethan, I know you are awake. My hand tightened around the phone. I wanted to answer without thinking. Who are you? What do you want? Are you hurt? The words pressed against my teeth. But the rule sheet trembled in my other hand, and Rule 6 stared back at me in the dim yellow light. Do not answer, even if it knows your name, especially if it sounds cold, tired, or familiar. I backed away from the door one slow step. Under the floor, the dryer kept turning. I did not count the rotations, not out loud, but somewhere in the back of my mind, the number 13 arrived on its own, and the machine stopped. The silence after the machine stopped was worse than the sound of it running. It left the room too open, too aware of me, like every wall had turned its attention toward the bed where I stood with the rule sheet shaking in my hand. My phone screen lit up on its own, still showing no service, but the time in the corner read 2:13 a.m. I did not move at first. I just stared at those numbers, feeling my stomach twist tighter and tighter because Rule 7 was no longer some creepy sentence on old paper. It was an instruction for right now. If the dryer stops at 2:13 a.m., go to the bathroom, stand inside the tub, and do not step out until you hear 3 knocks from the pipes. I looked toward the bathroom door. The yellow light inside flickered once, then steadied. I tried to tell myself I had not really counted. The number 13 had just appeared in my head because the room number was 13, because the listing had mentioned it, because my brain was making patterns under stress. That had to be it. But beneath the floor, something shifted inside the laundromat with a heavy metallic click, and the smell of warm lint crept up through the room like breath through cloth. I moved. I grabbed the flashlight Mrs. Ward had given me, kept the rule sheet pressed against my chest, and crossed the room without looking at the window or the covered television. Every step felt too loud. The floorboards gave small complaints under my shoes, and from below came a faint dragging sound. Not footsteps exactly, more like wet fabric being pulled across tile. I reached the bathroom, stepped into the tub, and pulled the shower curtain halfway around me, because some foolish part of me wanted a barrier, even a thin plastic one. The tub was dry and cold through my socks. The fan hummed overhead. I kept my eyes on the cracked white tile above the faucet and waited. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then my phone rang from the other room. The sound nearly made me flinch out of the tub. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and stopped. A moment later, it started again. I could see the faint glow of the screen through the gap in the bathroom door. I did not need to read the caller identification to know it would not be Mrs. Ward. The voice from downstairs had already known my name. Now it wanted me to cross the room. I clenched my teeth and stayed still. The ringing stopped. Then my own voice came from the phone speaker, calm and close, saying, "Ethan, you left something in the dryer." My skin went cold. It sounded exactly like me, but not like a recording. It sounded like me standing in the other room, tired and annoyed, trying not to wake a neighbor. "Ethan," my voice said again, "come get it before Mrs. Ward sees." I pressed the rule sheet against my chest so hard the paper crumpled. This was a prank, I told myself. Some kind of Bluetooth speaker. Some previous tenant with a sick sense of humor. But my phone was locked. I had not connected to any speaker, and there was no one in the building except me and whatever was below. A soft clink came from the bathroom sink. I turned my eyes before I could stop myself. A quarter sat in the basin, bright and wet, though I had not heard it fall through the air. My breath caught. Rule 4. If one appears in your room, do not touch it with bare skin. Place it in a glass of water and leave the glass outside your door before sunrise. The quarter rocked once on its edge, then settled flat with the face side up. I looked away fast, my heart hammering. because the rule did not say what would happen if a coin appeared while I was trapped in the tub. The bathroom cabinet creaked. Just a little. The mirror door was open by a hair, even though I had closed it earlier. I remembered the second part of Rule 7. Do not open the bathroom cabinet during this time. I had not opened it. I knew I had not. But the cabinet moved again, slowly, as if something inside was pushing with one careful finger. The smell changed then. Not lint anymore. Detergent. Sweet detergent, thick and fake, like too much fabric softener poured into hot water. It filled the bathroom so quickly my throat tightened. I wanted to cough, but I was afraid even that would count as answering. The fan above me rattled. From inside the wall behind the shower, something tapped once against the pipe. I leaned toward it before I could think. Another tap came from the sink pipe, then a third from somewhere under the tub, directly beneath my feet. 3 knocks. The rule said I could step out after 3 knocks. My body almost obeyed. My knees bent. My hand reached for the curtain. Then I stopped, because the knocks had not come from the same pipe. Rule 8 said if the air smelled sweet, call Mrs. Ward, but do not speak into the phone. Tap 3 times on the nearest pipe and wait. The 3 knocks I heard were not permission. They were an imitation. My mouth went dry. The phone in the other room lit up again, and this time the voice that came through was not mine. It was Mrs. Ward, low and urgent. Mr. Miller, do not leave the tub. It learned the number, not the rule. I almost answered her. Thank God, almost left my mouth. But Rule 6 came back so sharply I felt it like a hand over my lips. Do not answer if a voice calls from downstairs, especially if it sounds familiar. I gripped the flashlight and used its metal end to tap the pipe beside the faucet. 1, 2, 3. The room went silent. The quarter in the sink stopped shining. The cabinet door eased shut by itself. Somewhere below, the last dryer started turning again, slower this time, heavier, like it was angry but patient. I stayed in the tub until the real 3 knocks came from one pipe only, clean and evenly spaced behind the wall. When I finally stepped out, my legs were numb. The phone was face down on the floor outside the bathroom, though I had left it on the desk. Its screen showed a live camera view of the laundromat below. At the back of the room, in front of the last dryer, stood a man wearing my wet jacket, with his face turned away from the camera. Then he lifted one hand and pointed toward the stairs. I stared at the phone on the floor for so long that the screen began to dim, and for one awful second I thought the live feed would vanish before I understood what I was seeing. I dropped to my knees and tapped the screen before it went black. The image brightened again. The laundromat below looked different through the camera, flatter and colder, all blue shadows and gray tile, with rows of dead machines facing each other like they were waiting for customers who would never come. At the very back, the last dryer glowed from inside with a dull white light. The man in front of it wore my jacket. Not a jacket like mine. Mine. The left sleeve had the same small tear near the cuff from when I caught it on a delivery shelf 2 weeks earlier. His back was too. The camera, shoulders slightly hunched, head tilted toward the metal staircase like he knew I was watching from above. I tried to tell myself it was a recording. Maybe the phone had somehow opened an old security feed. Maybe Mrs. Ward used cameras to scare tenants away from sneaking downstairs. But the man raised his right hand again, slowly, and pointed at the stairs with the same crooked finger I had broken in high school. My stomach turned. I looked at my own hand. The finger was still crooked. That made it worse, not better. I crawled backward until my spine hit the bed frame. The phone rang in my hand. This time the caller identification said room 13. I was inside room 13. The number did not exist. I let it ring. The sound was not normal anymore. Each ring seemed to come from 2 places at once. The phone speaker and the laundromat below, echoing up through the floor like a machine bell. It stopped after the 4th ring. Then a voicemail began playing without me touching anything. My own voice came through, slightly breathless. Hey, it is me. I need you to open the door. I left my keys downstairs, and Mrs. Ward is going to be mad if she finds out. There was a pause, then a softer laugh. You know how she gets about the rules. I almost threw the phone. Hearing my own voice use fear like bait made something inside me go numb. I had spent the last hour trying to prove I was still being rational, still making smart choices, still just a tired guy in a weird rental. But rational people do not receive calls from their own room. Rational people do not watch themselves standing in a closed laundromat under their floor. I looked at the rule sheet again, searching for anything that mentioned a copy, a reflection, A person wearing your clothes. The paper looked the same at first. Then I noticed a line near the bottom that I could have sworn had not been there before. If it looks like you, ask it what it left in the dryer. Do not ask twice. My hands shook so badly the paper crackled. The phone screen changed from the security feed to a black call screen. Room 13 calling. I did not answer. A knock came from my door. One. Soft knock. Then my voice outside the room said, "Ethan, come on. I know you were scared." I did not move. My throat was so dry it hurt. The voice sighed, exactly the way I sigh when I am frustrated and trying to stay polite. "You are making this harder than it has to be. I know what is in the dryer." I pressed my free hand over my mouth, not because I wanted to answer, but because I was afraid some sound might escape. The doorknob turned halfway, stopped against the lock, and turned back. The chain gave one tiny metallic click. I watched it, frozen. It did not break. It did not slide loose. It only moved enough to remind me that metal was not the same thing as safety. My phone buzzed again. The live feed returned. The copy of me was no longer standing by the last dryer. The space in front of it was empty. The dryer door was open now, just a few inches, and white steam drifted out even though the air downstairs looked cold. The camera angle shifted by itself to the stairwell. I saw the bottom step, then the second, then the third. Something wearing my shoes stepped into view. I backed toward the bathroom, remembering the tub, the pipes, the fake knocks, the real knocks, all of it tangled together in my head. The voice at the door softened. "Ethan, listen to me." It sounded less like me now and more like someone copying me from memory. I left my loneliness in the dryer. That sentence hit me harder than any scream could have. I do not know how to explain it. It was absurd, almost meaningless, but some part of me understood exactly what it meant. Those months of driving until 2 in the morning, eating dinner in parking lots, smiling at strangers through app notifications, sleeping in my car while pretending I was between places instead of homeless. I had carried that loneliness into this building, and whatever lived under the floor had smelled it the way a dog smells food. The lock clicked again. I remembered the new rule. Ask it what it left in the dryer. Do not ask twice. My voice shook when I finally spoke, and I hated that it counted as answering. But I knew the question mattered. What did you leave in? The dryer? The room went still. The thing outside did not reply at first. Then, very quietly, it said, "The part of you that wants to be let in." The chain snapped tight. Not open, just tight. Like something had pulled the door inward from the hallway and found the limit of what the room would allow. The hall light flickered. Under the floor, the last dryer began spinning again. Faster now, not steady enough to count. My phone screen showed the stairwell empty, but the shadow under my door was still there. It leaned close to the gap, and my own voice whispered, "You should have asked before I reached the stairs." I grabbed the glass from the bathroom sink, filled it with water, and used the rule sheet to slide the quarter from the basin into it without touching the metal. The second the coin hit the water, the shadow under the door pulled back. The phone went black. For one blessed moment, there was only the sound of my own breathing and the dryer below. Then 3 slow knocks came from the pipe behind the bathroom wall. Mrs. Ward's Rayal voice followed, thin and distant. "Mr. Miller, if you can hear me, do not open your door yet. It knows your shape now. At 4:04, you are going downstairs." I stood there with one hand on the bathroom pipe and the other wrapped around the glass of water, watching the quarter at the bottom shimmer like it was still falling. Mrs. Ward's voice had faded after that last warning, leaving only the low, restless turning beneath the floor. "At 4:04, you are going downstairs." The words made no sense and perfect sense at the same time. Every rule up to that point had told me not to go down there, not to look, not to answer, not to give the laundromat any more of myself than I already had. Now the only person who seemed real in the entire building was telling me I would have to walk straight into it. I wanted to tell myself she was wrong. I wanted to believe I could stay in room 13 until sunrise, climb out the window if I had to, leave my duffel bags behind, and never come within a mile of that place again. But the room no longer felt like a room. It felt like a lid. Something underneath it was pushing upward, and the rules were not keeping me safe so much as keeping that pressure contained. I picked up the first rule sheet and read it again from the top, slower this time, looking for anything I had missed. The paper smelled faintly damp now, like it had been sitting inside a washing machine. Near the bottom, below the line about asking the copy what it left in the dryer, new words had started to bleed through from the other side. I turned the sheet over. There had not been writing there before. I know there had not, because I had checked it earlier when I was trying to prove to myself the whole thing was some stupid tenant prank. Now the back of the page was filled with thin gray handwriting, not neat like the rules, but cramped and slanted, as if written in a hurry by someone sitting where I was sitting. The last dryer does not dry clothes. It dries what follows people home. I read that sentence 3 times before it meant anything. Under it, the writing continued. It takes damp things. Not water. Not fabric. Things that cling. Grief. Hunger. Shame. Loneliness. Fear that has nowhere to go. It spins them until they come loose. Then it keeps them, unless someone opens the door. My throat tightened. I thought of the voice outside telling me it had left my loneliness in the dryer. I thought of all the nights I had sat in my car watching apartment windows glow, telling myself I was fine because admitting otherwise felt like falling. The room seemed to lean closer as I kept reading. This building was not built wrong. It was chosen because people come here when they have nowhere else to go. The dryer listens best to people who are tired enough to mistake a trap for shelter. I sat down on the edge of the tub because my legs suddenly felt weak. That was me. That was exactly me. I had not found room 13 because of luck or timing or a generous landlord. I had been heard. The laundromat had found the shape of my desperation and offered me a key. Below the writing was a name I did not recognize. Aaron Pike, tenant before you. I stared at it, remembering the camera feed, the copy wearing my jacket, the voice that had called from my own room. Had Aaron written the rules? Had he survived long enough to warn the next person? Or was I reading the last piece of him that made it upstairs? A small scraping sound came from the bathroom vent above the toilet. I lifted the flashlight, hands trembling, and saw one corner of the vent cover bent outward. Behind it was a folded notebook wrapped in plastic. I should have left it there. I know that now. Every new piece of information in that building came with a cost. But when you are alone and scared, answers feel like oxygen. I dragged the desk chair into the bathroom, climbed just high enough to reach the vent, and pulled the notebook free. The plastic was cold and wet on the inside. The first page had the same name as the back of the rule sheet. Aaron Pike, room 13. If you are reading this, she rented it again. The pages were full of short entries, some dated, some not. Aaron had been a temp warehouse worker from Akron. He had moved in during winter after sleeping in a storage unit for 3 weeks. He had heard the dryer on his first night too. He had counted. He had answered a voice he thought was his sister. By the 3rd entry, he had realized the laundromat was not trying to kill him. It was trying to copy enough of him to walk out wearing the parts he wanted to be rid of. That sounded almost merciful until I read the next line. What comes out is not free of pain. It is made of it. If it leaves, it looks for places full of people who feel the same. Shelters, buses, hospitals, apartment buildings. Anywhere loneliness stacks up. My hands went numb around the notebook. The last dryer was not just some haunted machine under my floor. It was a drain, or a lock, or maybe a mouth, and room 13 was the weight holding it shut. Mrs. Ward had not rented me a cheap room. She had put me above a pressure valve. The phone on the bathroom floor flickered again, but no call came through. Instead, the screen showed the laundromat camera. The copy of me stood at the bottom of the stairs now, face still turned away, one hand resting on the railing. The timestamp jumped between 2 a.m., 2:13 a.m., and 3:33 a.m., never settling. Then the image distorted, and for one frame I saw the last dryer door from the inside. Beyond the round glass was the laundromat, warped and distant, like the room was underwater. Pressed against that glass were pale shapes that might have been hands, or sleeves, or faces hidden under wet cloth. I looked away before I could understand too much. From the pipe, Mrs. Ward knocked 3 times again. Her voice followed, weaker than before. You know now? That means it will stop pretending soon. I leaned close to the pipe, but did not speak. I tapped once to show I heard her. She understood. At 4:04, she whispered, "You must go down and reset the breaker behind the service counter. Do not look into the dryer glass. Do not pick up any coins. Do not answer yourself. And if you smell sweet detergent, move faster." I looked at the clock on my phone. It said 3:33 a.m., then 2:13, then 4:03. My blood went cold. The room filled with that sugary detergent smell so thick it coated my tongue. Under the floor, the last dryer stopped spinning. A second later, something knocked on my door using my own knuckles. The knock came again, soft and exact, 3 taps spaced the way I knock when I do not want to wake someone. That was what made it so much worse. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was polite. My own knuckles against my own door, asking to be let in. I stood in the bathroom with Aaron Pike's notebook open in one hand and the flashlight in the other, feeling the sugary detergent smell thicken around me until every breath tasted fake and clean. The clock on my phone would not settle. 3:33 a.m., 2:13 a.m., 4:03 a.m. Then black. I turned it face down on the sink without looking at the reflection in the screen. The thing outside knocked again. "Ethan," my voice said from the hall, calm and tired. "I know you can hear me. We need to talk before Mrs. Ward makes you do something stupid." I did not answer. My tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth so hard it hurt. Rule 6 had become less of a warning and more of a commandment by then. If a voice calls from downstairs, do not answer, even if it knows your name, especially if it sounds cold, tired, or familiar. The problem was, the voice was not downstairs anymore. It was outside my room. It knew that too. It lowered itself into a whisper, almost amused. "The rule says downstairs, Ethan. I am not downstairs." My hand tightened around the flashlight until my fingers ached. The hallway light flickered under the door, thin yellow turning blue for one heartbeat, then yellow again. I backed away from the bathroom entrance and pressed my shoulder against the pipe in the wall. I tapped once, like I had before. There was no response. I tapped again. Nothing. For the first time since Mrs. Ward's warning, the pipes were silent. The thing outside sighed with my lungs. "She cannot hear you while the dryer is open," it said. "You are wasting time." From below, the last dryer gave a slow metal groan, and something moved through the floorboards with the soft drag of wet laundry. I told myself it was sound traveling through old vents. I told myself nothing solid could come up through pipes and walls. But the notebook in my hand had already told me this place did not work like a normal building. It used whatever followed people home. It used what clung, and I had brought plenty with me. Then Mrs. Ward screamed from downstairs. It was not subtle. It was not a trickle of sound through a pipe. It came through the floor, up the stairwell, through the walls, raw with fear. "Mr. Miller, help me. Please." My body moved before my brain did. I took 2 steps toward the door, already picturing her small gray cardigan caught on a railing, her old hand trapped near the machine, her voice breaking because I had stayed upstairs reading rules while a real person suffered. Then I stopped so suddenly my socks slid on the bathroom tile. The camera, I thought. Check the camera. The phone screen was still black, but when I tapped it, the laundromat feed appeared without asking for a password. The angle showed the service counter, the rows of washers, and the last dryer glowing at the back. Mrs. Ward was there, or something wearing enough of her to hurt me. Her gray cardigan lay across the tile in front of the last dryer, one sleeve stretched toward the stairs. But the woman herself was not visible. The screaming continued anyway. It came from the phone speaker and from beneath the floor at the same time. "Help me," she cried. "It has my arm. It has my keys. It has the rules." I stared at the empty tile around the cardigan. No person, no shadow, no movement except the slow pulse of white light inside the dryer drum. My heart hammered against my ribs. It knew I would not open the door for myself anymore, so it had moved to her. That was when 3 knocks finally came through the pipe behind me. Not from the wall near the sink. From the bathroom pipe, where Mrs. Ward had spoken before. 3 clean taps, evenly spaced. I leaned close, careful not to speak. Her real voice came through weakly, thin as air passing through a straw. "Camera first. Always camera first. If the camera does not see me, your ears are lying." I closed my eyes and let out a shaking breath through my nose. The copy outside my door changed tactics immediately. The knocking stopped. The voice became my mother's. Not the way she sounded at the end, tired from long shifts and too many bills, but the way she sounded when I was a kid and had a fever, gentle and close, saying my name like it belonged somewhere safe. "Ethan, honey, open the door. I know you were scared." I hated it for choosing that voice. I hated myself more for wanting to believe it. My hand lifted toward the lock. I actually saw my fingers reach for it, as if they belonged to another person. Then I remembered what Aaron had written. It listens best to people who are tired enough to mistake a trap for shelter. I stepped back. The voice changed again. Now it sounded like me, but younger, maybe 17, maybe before everything started narrowing into rent and gas and late fees. "Come on, man," it said. "We both know you want out. Let me take the part that hurts. The sweet detergent smell got stronger, and for 1 second I understood the offer. That was the most dangerous part. It was not just trying to scare me. It was trying to sound useful. Open the door, and the loneliness goes downstairs. Open the door, and something else carries it for you. Open the door, and maybe you sleep without dreaming of parking lots. I pressed both hands over my ears, but the drier rhythm came through my palms, through my skull, through the soles of my feet. Then a new line appeared on the rule sheet lying near the sink. I saw the letters form slowly, darkening as if ink were rising from inside the paper. If it offers relief, ask what it costs. I looked at the door. My voice waited on the other side, breathing softly. What does it cost? I asked, barely above a whisper. The answer came right away. Only the door. I almost laughed. It sounded so small. But through the phone camera, I saw the last dryer door widen another inch, and beyond the round glass was not a metal drum. It was a hallway lined with apartment doors, hospital curtains, bus seats, shelter cots, and all the tired places lonely people go when they have nowhere better. Only the door, it had said. Not my door. Any door. Every door it could learn to open if I let it out. The pipe knocked 3 times. Mrs. Ward whispered, "For 04 is coming. When the hall light turns blue and stays blue, go down. Walk backward. Use the glass. Do not look into the dryer. And if you hear yourself crying, move faster." The hallway light under my door flickered once more. Yellow, blue, yellow. Then it turned blue and did not change back. The blue light under my door stayed steady, thin and cold, like the hallway had filled with water. For a few seconds I could not move. Everything in me wanted to stay in the bathroom, keep my back against the wall, and wait for morning to solve what I was too scared to face. But the smell of sweet detergent was getting stronger, so thick it coated the back of my throat, and from below came the heavy, uneven rhythm of the last dryer opening and closing, like something large was breathing through metal. Mrs. Ward had said 4:04 was coming. My phone screen, face down on the sink, glowed through the glass edge and showed the time reflected backward on the tile. For 04 a.m., I picked up the flashlight, the rule sheet, and the glass of water with the quarter at the bottom. I did not know if I still needed the coin, but leaving it behind felt wrong, and by then I trusted wrong feelings more than normal explanations. I walked to the room door without looking through the peephole. The voice outside had gone quiet, which made the hall feel worse. I unlocked the chain slowly, expecting something to push inward. Nothing did. When I opened the door, the hallway outside room 13 was empty. The light above the stairwell burned blue, not flickering now, not buzzing, just glowing with a flat underwater color that made the peeling wallpaper look gray and dead. I stepped out backward because Mrs. Ward had told me to use the glass. The framed picture at the end of the hallway, an old faded print of Lake Erie, had enough reflection in it to show me the stairs behind my shoulder. That was how I moved. Not by looking where I was going, but by watching warped reflections in glass, picture frames, and the dark screen of my phone. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around. I did not. The first step down groaned under my heel. Then the second. Then the third. From the laundromat below came a soft clink. A quarter rolled into view on the landing beside my foot, spinning in a tight circle, bright and wet. I almost bent down out of habit. People pick up coins without thinking. That is what made it such a good trap. Rulfer caught me just in time. Do not pick it up. I stepped around it, still walking backward, holding the flashlight pointed at the ceiling so I would not accidentally shine it into the dryer glass. Halfway down the stairs, my own voice began crying from below. Not talking, crying. Quiet, embarrassed crying. The kind I had done in my car with the radio turned up so no one in the grocery store parking lot would hear. My chest tightened so hard I nearly missed the next step. "Ethan, please," it said between breaths. "I do not want to be down here anymore." I kept moving. The laundromat floor appeared in the reflection of the front glass doors, stretched and dim. Rows of machines on both sides, plastic chairs, vending machines empty of soap, dusty folding tables. At the back, the last dryer pulsed with white light. I did not look at it directly. I watched it only as a pale smear in the glass reflection. Even that was almost too much. My eyes wanted to focus. My mind wanted to understand the shape beyond the round door, the hallway inside the drum, the things pressed against the glass. I forced my gaze down to the reflection of my shoes. One step, then another. The service counter was 20 feet away, maybe less, but it felt like a mile. The breaker panel was behind it, a gray metal box with a red handle, exactly where Mrs. Ward had said it would be. Between me and the counter, coins lay scattered across the tile in a crooked trail. Quarters, nickels, dimes, some old and dark, some shining like they had just been minted. Each one made a tiny sound when I passed. Clink, 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 as if settling after being dropped. I held the glass of water tighter. The quarter inside it began to vibrate. Then every dryer except the last one clicked open at once. I froze. In the reflection, the open dryer doors looked like dark circles watching me. A whisper moved through the laundromat, many voices layered together, all tired, all familiar in ways I could not place. Just one look, just one answer, just one door. I reached the service counter and felt behind it for the latch without turning around. My fingers brushed dust, old receipts, a cold metal key, and finally the breaker box handle. The sweet smell became unbearable. My eyes watered. The last dryer spun up fast, too fast to be an old machine, the rhythm breaking apart, so I could not count it even by accident. My copy screamed my name from somewhere near the stairs, and for one terrible second, I thought it had reached room 13. I saw its reflection in the front glass, standing halfway down the stairwell, wearing my jacket, my shoes, my posture, but its head was turned toward the dryer, as if waiting for permission. The rule sheet in my pocket grew warm. I pulled it out with one hand and saw a new line forming in the blue light. If it reaches the bottom stair before the breaker is reset, it may leave with any face it has learned. My fingers slipped. On the breaker handle, the copy took another step. The dryer door widened in the reflection, white light spilling across the tile like fog. From inside it, my mother's voice, Mrs. Ward's voice, Aaron Pike's voice, and my own voice all spoke together. "We can make it stop hurting." I almost believed them. That was the closest I came to losing. Not because I wanted to die, not because I wanted to help it, but because part of me wanted to put down every heavy thing I had carried into that room. Loneliness, shame, fear, the exhaustion of pretending I was fine. Then the quarter in the glass cracked against the side so sharply that I flinched. Water splashed over my hand, cold as ice. I remembered Rule 3. Attention is payment. I remembered Rule 4. Do not touch the coin. I remembered Mrs. Ward's voice. Do not answer yourself. So I closed my eyes, turned my face away from every reflection, and pulled the breaker handle down with both hands. The laundromat went black. For 1 second there was no sound at all. Then the last dryer slammed shut so hard the floor jumped under my feet. The blue hallway light snapped off. A normal yellow bulb buzzed to life above the stairs. I stood behind the counter in darkness, breathing through my sleeve, waiting for something to grab me, waiting for my own voice to whisper from inches away. Instead, 3 clean knocks came from the pipe under the service sink. Mrs. Ward's Rayal voice followed, barely louder than the hum of the old building. "Do not turn around yet, Mr. Miller. Not until the sun touches the front glass." For a few minutes after I pulled the breaker, I let myself believe the night had ended. The laundromat was still, and that stillness felt almost impossible after everything I had heard moving under the floors and behind the walls. No dryer turning, no coins falling, no voice calling from the stairwell, no sweet detergent thickening the air until every breath felt borrowed. I stood behind the service counter with my eyes closed, one hand still gripping the dead breaker handle, waiting for Mrs. Ward to tell me it was safe to move. The only sound left was the old building settling around me and my own breathing shaking through my sleeve. Then, slowly, the front windows began to change. The black glass softened into gray. A thin strip of early morning spread across the sidewalk outside, weak and cold, but real. It touched the lower edge of the laundromat door first, then the dusty tile, then the legs of the plastic chairs lined against the wall. Mrs. Ward knocked 3 times through the pipe under the service sink. "Clean. Even. Human. You can look now, Mr. Miller," she whispered. I opened my eyes and turned around. The laundromat looked ordinary. That was the part that nearly broke me. It was not flooded with shadows anymore. It was not breathing through the last dryer. It was just an empty laundromat that had been closed too long, with dead machines, yellowed ceiling panels, old soap stains on the folding tables, and a cracked vending machine with no detergent inside. The last dryer sat at the back with its round door shut, dark and harmless looking. I did not trust it, but I wanted to. I wanted to believe the rules had worked, that I had reset whatever needed resetting, that room 13 had been a terrible accident I could walk away from as soon as the sun came up. I found Mrs. Ward sitting on the bottom stair, wrapped in her gray cardigan, looking smaller than she had the night before. Her hair had come loose from its bun, and her face seemed older in the morning light, not years older exactly, but worn down, like the building had taken payment from her while I was upstairs. She looked at me with tired eyes and said, "You did better than most." I almost laughed because it sounded like praise, and praise was such a strange thing to receive after surviving a place that had tried to speak with my own mouth. I asked her if it was over. She did not answer right away. Instead, she looked toward the last dryer. That was when I noticed the first wrong thing. The wall clock above the service counter read 2:13 a.m. Its second hand ticked forward normally, but the hour and minute hand stayed fixed. I looked at my phone. It had service again. The screen said 6:08 a.m. The camera app was open, still showing the laundromat feed, even though I was standing inside the laundromat and there was no visible camera where the angle should have been. On the screen, the room was empty except for the last dryer, and in front of it, taped to the glass door, was my rule sheet. I looked up. The actual rule sheet was not in my pocket anymore. It was across the room, stuck to the round dryer glass from the inside. My name was written at the bottom in dark wet letters. Ethan Miller. I stepped back so fast my shoulder hit the counter. Mrs. Ward closed her eyes like she had been waiting for me to see it. I asked her what it meant, but my voice came out thin and childish. She told me the final rule was not written to save tenants. It was written to keep the door from learning how to open outward. I did not understand until she pointed at the last dryer and said the building was not the trap. The laundromat was the lock. Room 13 was the weight on top of it. And people like me, people tired enough and lonely enough to answer cheap listings in the rain, were not chosen because we were weak. We were chosen because the thing inside could hear what clung to us. If it pulled those things loose and wore them well enough, it could pass as human. It could walk into shelters, buses, hospitals, apartment buildings, any place full of people carrying the same invisible weight. The rules did not keep me alive because I was special. They kept me alive because somebody had to keep the last dryer closed. My throat went dry. I thought about Aaron Pike's notebook. I thought about Mrs. Ward saying she was paying rent too. I looked at her then, really looked, and saw the small brass key hanging from her neck, the one she had not used to unlock anything the night before. She touched it without thinking and said every tenant who makes it to sunrise gets a choice. But her face told me choice was too generous a word. Leave before the next night, and whatever learned your shape keeps looking for another way out. Stay, and you become part of the rules that hold it in. I wanted to say no. I wanted to run through the front door into the ordinary Cleveland morning, find my car, drive until the city was behind me, and never sleep near a laundromat again. Then the front door clicked. The chain across it loosened by itself and fell against the glass. It was 6:09 a.m., broad morning by every clock that mattered, but the laundromat door had opened at the wrong time. Cold air moved through the room, carrying the faint sweet smell of detergent toward the street. Behind me, the last dryer gave one soft click. Not open, not spinning, just awake. Mrs. Ward whispered, "It is testing whether you will let it follow." That was when the old rule paid off in the worst way. Do not pick up the coin. I looked down and saw a wet quarter lying inches from the threshold, shining in the morning light. A man on the sidewalk had stopped to look through the glass, probably just curious about the old laundromat with its door suddenly open. The coin rolled toward him by itself. I grabbed the glass of water from the counter, the one I had carried downstairs, and slid it across the tile with my foot until the quarter tipped into it. The door slammed shut so hard the chain jumped back into place. The man outside frowned, shook his head, and kept walking. I had saved him. I had also answered the choice. Mrs. Ward took the key from her neck and placed it in my hand. It was warm, too warm. The rule sheet peeled itself from the inside of the dryer glass and dropped to the floor. A new line had appeared under my name. If you make it until morning, you become the reason the last dryer stays closed. Mrs. Ward stood, suddenly looking lighter and more afraid at the same time. She told me she was sorry. Then she walked up the stairs toward room 13, and when I followed, the hallway did not lead to my room anymore. It stretched farther than the building should allow, lined with doors marked with old brass numbers, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, names scratched beneath them: Aaron Pike, Helen Ward, and now Ethan Miller. I am telling you this because someone else will see the listing. Maybe not today. Maybe not in Cleveland. Maybe it will be a room above a closed laundromat in some other city, for a price low enough to make you ignore the warnings. If you move in and find a folded sheet of rules, read every line. Keep the hall light on. Do not answer voices from below. Do not count the rotations after 2 a.m. And if your name appears at the bottom of the page, I am sorry. The rules are not trying to scare you. They are trying to keep whatever hurt you from following you home.